Welcome to TCS, the TechCentral Show. I'm Duncan McLeod. If you haven't subscribed to us on YouTube yet, please do so. You can do that at youtube.com/TechCentral. Alternatively, subscribe to our daily newsletter at techcentral.co.za/newsletter. 5 a.m. every morning, you'll get an update with all the latest tech news, including the latest episodes of TCS. Now, we don't often get to talk logistics much on TechCentral, but they are an integral component of everything that's happening in the booming e-commerce space. And to talk about what's involved in logistics behind e-commerce, I'm very pleased now to welcome Lars Veul, who is the co-founder and CEO of Pargo, into the TechCentral studio. Lars, welcome. Tell me a little bit about Pargo. Give us the elevator pitch about the company. How long have you been around? What do you guys do?
Yeah, thanks. Pargo is a last mile logistics business.
Mm-hmm.
We've been around since 2015. We founded the company together with my co-founder Derk Hoekert.
Mm-hmm.
We both have a background in e-commerce. We're from the Netherlands. We arrived in South Africa in 2012. Back then, still working for a big e-commerce company, sent to Cape Town to help grow this business. Very much attracted by the huge potential of e-commerce growth that we saw on the continent. But then very quickly realized the biggest challenge that e-commerce has is last mile logistics, is getting the parcels in the hands of the consumer. And for about 2 years, working with different couriers and trying to figure out what the real problem was, eventually decided that the solution for that problem was something that was bigger than just that one company we were working for, which led us to quit our jobs and start Pargo.
Okay.
And what Pargo does specifically, it's a bit unique, is we basically operate the pickup point or click and collect model. So we partner up with thousands of existing stores throughout the country and allow people to send and receive or return orders at those stores.
Okay.
And the biggest challenge we saw back then, and I think still exists, and really the problem we're trying to solve, was that at that point in time, we had months where up to 30% of our orders were just never reaching the end user because of address problems, because of the areas where they live in, be it a township that's high risk or a big living estate that has a big wall around it. People in offices, big buildings that don't allow couriers to get into their buildings. So there's a whole bunch of reasons, and then on top of that, just the sheer reason that a lot of people are not at home at the exact time that the courier gets there. So a lot of reasons why people were not receiving their parcels, and we came up with a very simple solution, the pick point drop-off model, and that's kind of how we started Pargo in 2015.
So have you always been in the e-commerce space? What is your background? What is Derk's background?
Yeah, so Derk and I have actually known each other for a very long time. We met each other in university. And both studying different things, and after a few years later, bit through coincidence by a third friend of ours that joined Groupon. At that point in time, very fast growing across the world.
I remember Groupon, yeah.
Back in Amsterdam. So we joined Groupon in 2010. And that was really the start of the e-commerce story. Did that for a few years in the Netherlands. Huge growth there at Groupon. Right. And then their growth was also that they were expanding aggressively into many markets across the world, including South Africa. And that was which was actually started by 2 South Africans here and then sold to Groupon, the company. And then we were asked to come to basically do a project for 2 years. The plan was that we would move back to the Netherlands, but 10 years later, here we still are.
Yeah. Is Groupon still around?
They are still around in a few countries around the world, but it's
not what it once was.
It's not what it's a great story of huge success in the early days, but then also huge failure after that. So like very quick growth and very quick decline in a very short period of time.
Yeah, must be. I'm sure there are a couple of books been written about that.
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of learnings, important learnings. Yeah,
for sure. So you've been going since about 2015. Have you been through various funding rounds? Do you have venture capitalists backing you?
Yeah.
How did you raise cash?
Yeah, we've raised some money. We raised a kind of a first seed round in 2017, beginning of 2017, and raised a kind of follow-up round on that about a year ago. Biggest names that people in South Africa probably know is Alan Gray. Their venture fund is one of our backers. and then Endeavor, which is an entrepreneurial group, which we're also part of as entrepreneurs, and then also have a bit of backing from them, and a Cape Townian-based investment fund called SAAD, SAAD, that back us.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And are these been Series A rounds?
Yeah. So it's been a seed, and now I'd say like a pre-Series A, Series A, what we've just closed.
And will you go through further rounds over the coming years?
Probably. I mean, we are building the business quite aggressively right now. Right. Also, for the first time, looking at expansion outside of South Africa. So, if everything goes well and we can continue the growth, the plan is that we then probably at some point we'll need extra backing to take it to the next level.
Okay. And those other countries that you will expand into, will they be neighboring countries to South Africa, or will you look at jumping into another continent?
No, we want to. So yeah. Our mission is to create access in Africa. That's big on our walls in the office. And what we see as the huge opportunity here is e-commerce growth in Africa. Yeah. But the problems that I was talking about earlier, we think that that's even bigger in the rest of Africa. Many African countries, we see, just like South Africa, we see this big growth happening in the e-commerce space. But accessibility and affordability are two major issues. I spoke a little bit about the accessibility. I think affordability is obviously a huge issue and a huge blocker. If your delivery cost is too high, then e-commerce becomes very difficult. And we see that across Africa, last mile logistical delivery can often be 4 times higher than what it is in the modern Western world, in America and Southeast Asia. And our model, not just because of the convenience that I explained before of collecting whenever it suits you best, but also that we are able to consolidate. We are able to send 100 parcels to 10 points instead of to 200 different addresses. Yeah. And all of those 100 orders are going to be successful on the first attempt. So our cost per order actually drastically comes down, making e-commerce much more accessible and affordable, especially in those hard to reach areas. And we see that huge success in South Africa in areas outside of the big major urban hubs. So outside of Johannesburg, Cape Town, Durban. We're quite successful in the Eastern Cape, quite successful in small towns around KZN, and all across the country, right? Interesting. Because the alternative we provide there is just much more affordable and accessible than a normal home delivery. So yeah, the plan is back to the question. The plan is that we want to take this into multiple African markets. Okay.
Now you're partnering with retailers. I know this because I'm testing Pargos system at the moment, and I have a delivery waiting for me at the nearby Click store. Yeah. You work with principally retailers, do you, on these collection points? Who are your partners?
Yeah. So it's all types of retailers, all types of stores. I mean, the big names would be, we have all the Click stores on board. We have the Caltex service stations, quite a few Shell service stations, but also Mr. Price is a partner, Cape Unimart, the Foschini Group, supermarket chains like Spar, Woolies coming on board right now. So it's a big group of multiple big retail groups. But then besides that, we also have many hundreds of mom and pop stores, spaza shops, independent entrepreneurs, independent retailers that use their stores also as these pickup points. At the moment, we have about just under 4,000 across the country in South Africa, and still growing. And really with a pickup point in every suburb, town, postal code in South Africa. So, I mean, it has to be really tiny if we don't have something there. Sure. But through that partnership model, obviously being able to expand that quite quickly.
So what's in it for the retailer? Let's say Clicks, for example. Yes. I'm going to walk into the Click store. I presume that's an incentive enough to partner with you because I might pick up something else while I'm there.
Exactly. That's the main reason. We do pay a very small... we pay a small fee for every parcel that they process, but that's really just to cover the basic cost. Right. The real reason they do it is foot traffic into the stores and the upsell opportunity. Yeah. We've seen that about just under 50% of customers that go into a store will combine that with a small purchase in that store, right? And especially, as you know, all these stores these days have those little aisles where you know with all the sweets and all the things, and there's the Coke cans and or cigarettes if you smoke, or obviously in your face. So it's very easy for you, obviously, to combine that with a purchase when you collect your parcel. Yeah,
absolutely. Now, just give me an idea of how this works practically. Let's say I run an online shop selling widgets, and I want to have that. I've sold a widget now, and I want to have it delivered to someone in Durban, say. Yeah. And I want to use Pargo.
Exactly.
Do I engage with Pargo myself as the online retailer, or do you work with the courier companies?
So we partner, or we like all the retail, the e-commerce companies will be our clients. So we go out and have many of these e-commerce businesses that work with us, and we provide them really an alternative. So we are not a logistics company that we don't have trucks, we don't have drivers. We actually we use 2 or 3 preferred couriers that already exist in the country to take those parcels from the warehouse, from the retailer, from the e-commerce company to these pickup points.
Okay.
But we do have the relationship with the e-commerce company. So they see us almost like as a courier, although we're not.
Yeah.
The way it works is that it's really just an added service, right? So we're not in the game if they have a good relationship with the courier already, that's perfect. Keep that, right? What we're saying is that there's somewhere around 20-25% of online users that, for all the reasons I mentioned earlier, would prefer to not have that parcel delivered to their home, but rather to a pickup point, right? And then we come in as a second option on the checkout page, the Pargo click and collect, and that little widget opens up the 4,000 stores where consumers can just choose the one that's close to them. Right. And then just practically how it works is that as soon as that order is placed, we then inform one of our preferred couriers to collect that parcel. We deliver it to the store. At the store, it gets scanned in, and that triggers an SMS and an email to the end user, to the consumer, to go and collect, and then they have 8 days to collect. So that's obviously one of the big reasons. You can collect when it suits you. Sure. You can do it on the weekends. You can do it in the evenings. Many of these stores that we have on board are also open 24/7. So it's really about the convenience for you to collect whenever you want to.
What about security? I mean, we know about crime in South Africa. If I order an expensive Apple laptop and have that delivered to my local retailer. What happens if something goes wrong or someone in that store decides, oh, I'd like this? Yeah.
Imagine two Dutch guys come to South Africa to solve an e-commerce problem, and their solution is to open up pickup points at Spaza shops. So you can imagine how much, we have a lot of South African advisors and partners, and you can imagine how they all kind of say, guys, you guys are crazy. This is never going to work. The reality is, well, first of all, because of all the warnings, we've built a system that is very safe and secure with a lot of checks and balances that we make sure that throughout the process goes well. The reality is that we have a very, very small loss rate of parcels. And of the parcels that go missing, it's almost all due to hijackings of our trucks, but not which is a common problem within the courier space, unfortunately, but not at these pickup points. And the reality is that it's not very lucrative to start going and buy and to start taking these little parcels, right? Because you said it could be an iPhone, that's true, but the chances of it being an iPhone are just as big or much smaller than it being a book or it being a pair of socks from a Mr. Price or something like that, right? So if you are working in a store and you're taking a big risk by starting to steal parcels, obviously, and it's a pair of socks or a book, it doesn't make sense for you. And I think maybe the good news as well is that I think for a lot of people that work in these stores, their job and having a job and being able to do that on a day-to-day basis is obviously way more valuable than that risk of a small parcel.
Okay, but so if something does get pilfered,
we have an insurance policy in place, right? So every parcel is insured. If it does go missing, insurance pays out.
Okay. Now, you were saying just before we started recording that you don't operate a network of lockers, or you've done some experimentation in that area. There are players in that space. I've seen these lockers pop up. I think Macro operates its own lockers in some areas. There's some courier companies have their own locker systems. But you guys have chosen to work rather with retail partners. So you go up to a counter rather than going to a locker and typing in a code. Why not go the locker route as other courier companies have done?
So we are partnering with a few locker companies in very specific areas, but it's a very small part of our business. The reason we've not gone the locker route is that it has a lot of limitations. Lockers obviously are mostly outside, so there's only certain areas where you can open up lockers and that they are safe. The solution is growing, and there's a few couriers now trying to do it, and we are seeing the successes of it. It's a much bigger investment, so your scalability of the locker model is also smaller. And what we've picked up is that a lot of the retailers whose space you would be using actually prefer the face-to-face contact with the consumer instead of them just going to a machine that will bring down the chances of that upsell opportunity.
Right.
And currently, which is a bit an issue the whole country is obviously facing, is load shedding, which is also a big issue on these lockers. That obviously. You go and collect your parcel, and there's now 4 to 6 hours per day. Those lockers actually won't open. You can't collect your parcel, and that's obviously not. Yeah, that's very frustrating. So we are looking at, here and there where we do use them in big malls, for instance, with a few selected partners for clients. But generally, we feel like the counter model is much more scalable and much quicker scalable.
Fascinating. And you see the same in the rest of Africa as well, I presume?
The rest of Africa, we leave the same. Like where we see huge, where I've seen lockers work really well is in certain European countries and cities where almost everybody in the population travels by public transport.
Right. Trains
don't use their own cars. Where you have train stations and bus stations where you just have these full of lockers and they're safe there, and then it works really well.
Yeah.
We don't really have that situation as much in South Africa.
Understood. So delivery to pickup points, how does that impact on the costs associated with last mile delivery in South Africa and the e-commerce system more broadly? And I suppose allied to that, what are the margins like in your business? Are they pretty brutal?
Look, I think margins within the logistics space are small. It's not a high margin game. It's a big volume game. You need to do a lot of parcels. But having said that, as I said before, so the way it works with us is that, or the way the classic industry works is that every order has to go to a certain address, right? One order per person. So that's many deliveries over many different addresses. And then secondly, a lot of people are not at home. So the numbers are a bit different per courier, but we can see that within not just the e-commerce, but across all industries, you can have up to 30-35% of orders not reaching their end user on the first attempt. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine what that does to your cost and for your the scalability and the operating a courier network like that as a courier business. With Pargo, as I said earlier, there's consolidation to these pickup points, so multiple parcels per drop and 100% delivery rate on that first attempt. So typically our prices are a little bit lower than they are with home delivery. Mm-hmm. It depends on if it's within the main center or far away, but we have even up to areas where it's up to 80% cheaper. 80%, yeah. And specifically, but typically it's somewhere between 20-30% cheaper.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I wanted to ask you about COVID and the impact that's had. It's been 3 years now since the first lockdown hit. And we know that there was a huge boon to the online shopping space in South Africa. And we saw things like Checker 6060 taking off in a massive way. How broadly did how did COVID affect the courier industry? I presume it was very negative initially and then changed quite a lot.
Well, yes, but even initially it was negative because like any other industry it went down for those 5 weeks, right? But already the courier industry was deemed an essential services industry. So I think most couriers, and the same for our business, we never went to zero, where like I think a lot of other people out there had a month of no sales. We could still, it was much lower than anticipated, but it didn't go to zero. That was the first thing. And then as soon as the first kind of 5 week lockdown, hard lockdown, we went from level 5 to level 4 and things started opening. It was basically the only way that people could start shipping goods, right? Remember Takealot being like big, pushing really hard as well to get that, to make sure that would stay like that. And then I think the industry just took off. So we saw a huge amount of, it was just a crazy time. I think we all got caught by surprise. So the courier side got overloaded by demand, right?
What sort of volumes are we looking at here as compared to like normal in that period?
Look, the industry, e-commerce went from, it was about 1% of total retail was online was 1% of total retail. Now they think it's about 4%, 4 to 5%. So that's a 4x over. That didn't just happen in one go, but that's kind of overall it happened. We saw huge growth as well. Not with every client that big, but overall it went up, and not just within e-commerce. It was all of a sudden every type of business. The only way that people could get products into the hands of the consumers was by sending it. Right? It was like this service where you had to send it to them, or it had to be one of the essential goods. So it was a bumpy year, a crazy year. I mean, also anecdotally, you could just see it. I mean, I think the best example I have is these two big clients, two big telcos that I've been, trying to get on board forever. And, I think that was like a 1.5, 2 year process already. And like, Lars, maybe, good idea, but we're not there yet. And that was a Sunday evening that the president did the first ever kind of announcement about this is
family
coming.
Meeting. Yes.
Yeah, remember that one. And that was a Sunday evening. I think the announcement was at 8 or 9 in the evening. And I think at 10 o'clock in the evening, I get a WhatsApp from like these two, like, Lars, can we have a meeting tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock first thing? Like, this thing that you've been trying to sell us, we need it right now. And that was kind of the movement. So we saw not just that current clients or existing clients volumes went up, but also that all of a sudden everybody in the market needed a solution. So it was a crazy year. The actual click and collect, what we're doing specifically, didn't grow as fast because obviously people now still have to collect. So you can imagine that actually percentage-wise stayed the same, or actually went down a little bit, but just the pure volume of everybody was just much higher.
Okay, and have we seen that being sustained as the economy has opened up again? Yeah,
so what we've seen is 2020 being a bumpy year, 2021, sustained. Yeah. But what we've seen is that last year, 2022, and we read about it as well, but we also saw it ourselves, is that's actually been a really tough year for a lot of businesses, also e-commerce businesses. So the percentage-wise, I think it's been sustained, but the growth that a lot of companies were having, obviously during COVID, but also before that, has really come down, and it's really kind of, I think people just have less money to spend, so also less money to spend online.
So it's more of a factor of the terrible state of the economy than anything else.
Okay. What we've seen specifically as a business is that's definitely the case. We've seen that click and collect again is picking up again since COVID as a percentage, right? Yeah. So more people per 100 orders are again choosing that kind of collection service.
I want to ask you about the South African Post Office.
Yeah.
It's there's been a lot of controversy around the Post Office, and they're trying to enforce their monopoly over small items that weigh less, I think, than a kilogram. Yeah. But the Post Office seems to be perennially broken. Yeah. Do you see any opportunity or likelihood that the Post Office could become a meaningful player in logistics and the e-commerce space in South Africa, or is it a lost cause in your view?
Look, we can't forget and underestimate how many orders they are still doing internationally. So all the big e-commerce players, like in China, and anywhere in the world, elsewhere in the world, are still, a lot of that volume is coming through the post office.
Through their post offices, or?
Well, so what it works is if you go to Alibaba or to Shein or to one of these, Wish, and you use these big Chinese companies, you'll probably, you'll see that you can actually get a product which is coming from China for next to nothing in terms of delivery costs, right?
It's usually the Hong Kong Postal Service, I've noticed.
So what happens is that they give it to, all the postal companies in the world, post offices in the world have a agreement together, and that's really cheap, right? It's like made for letters, right? And that's why obviously you can just post your letter and get it from here to anywhere in the world for a stamp, right? And that same service, that same principle exists now for online goods. I mean, in a way, the growth of Alibaba as a global company has been kind of subsidized by the post offices around the world. It's actually quite ridiculous if you think about it that way. And then obviously more and more these big companies are thinking, because that service is not great, so they are thinking about how can we get that better. So they'll work together with companies like DHL or Aramex, big global logistics businesses. And you pay obviously, you pay $20, $25 to just get it through them. But then you know that you'll probably get it within a week, and it will be more certainty. So we're seeing the post office still playing a big role. If you look at it domestically, obviously, I think there's I have not heard or come across any e-commerce business as long as I've had this, as long as we've run this company that uses the post office. Actually, our growth and the opportunity and a lot of our early success came from big businesses that were using the post office and that were just looking for alternatives. So in our first year, we actually saw big companies that that would have never taken the risk to work with a small startup, two guys with an idea, but they just didn't have an alternative. And because what we're doing is basically what the post office should be doing. So a lot of our growth has actually come from companies previously using post office.
So the private sector has really taken over a lot of the work that the post office should have been doing. In the first place. Interesting. Do you think there's still a chance that the post office could be turned into something?
I don't know. I don't know. I think a lot of people have tried it. I know Mark Barnes tried it for a long time there. I don't know him personally, but he seems like a very capable man. And I think he left them eventually, also saying like it's not. I think there's bigger problems within the country, not just the post office, that are preventing that to happen at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. Before I let you go, Lars, tell me a little bit about Pargos' future. Where are you guys going? I know you've spoken about expanding into other markets, but maybe bigger picture, where do you see Pargo positioning itself in the market? And do you see maybe complementary areas that you might want to expand into?
Yeah. So I think there's a few things. First of all, in South Africa, we still see that e-commerce. We believe e-commerce is still, although there's been a lot of growth, it's still very small. If you look at anywhere else in the world, the expectations is that it's still really going to take off. We're all going through a bit of a hard time, I would say, economically. I think everybody sees that, not just in South Africa, but globally. But if you take a long-term view, I think you're going to start seeing that 10 years from now, e-commerce has really become a substantial part of our business, of our economy, of what we do. So we see a lot of growth, and what we're doing as the service that we're in, we also see that globally is one of the fastest growing last mile logistic solutions, right? So in South Africa, there's a lot of opportunity for growth. What we are looking at is, at the moment, we spoke today, we speak mostly about this being a collection point, but this network you can do much more. Already at the moment you can collect a parcel, you can return your parcel, right. You can send your parcel. We're working on a pay for your parcel solution there as well. So we really want to become, build a business whereby at these stores you have this huge network of physical points where you can do many different things to make your sending or receiving of a parcel just much easier.
Sure.
That's in South Africa, and then, as I said earlier, we see huge opportunity also outside of South Africa, where we're looking at expanding into other African markets outside of South Africa. So we're looking at the whole continent. Usual suspects, I guess, are East Africa. So from Kenya, there's a lot of happening. West Africa around Nigeria, there's a lot happening, and Northern Africa in Egypt. At the moment, we're running a small pilot in Egypt, actually. So that's going very well so far.
I've heard a lot of people saying that Egypt is a very interesting market at the moment.
No, I've been there now 3 times. It's funny because it's in a way, obviously Arabic and culturally very different to South Africa.
Yeah.
But from an economic point of view, and especially from an e-commerce point of view, very similar to what we see in South Africa. In that way that it just like South Africa has a few very big players that are online.
Right.
It has a reasonable kind of middle ground, large to medium-sized businesses, and then has a very big long tail. And we see the same in South Africa. Whereas the rest of Africa, you'll see a few big clients, big businesses, and then millions of small businesses. And then also like just the digitization of the country, the president really pushing there for a lot of new digital products. There's a lot of fintechs, a lot of South African fintechs. Actually, in our office, our 2 offices in Egypt, literally out next to us is Yoko, which is like down the road from Cape Town from our office as well.
Okay. Yeah. Funnily enough, I was chatting to Stephen van Coller from EOH, which owns and he was punting Egypt in a big way.
Yeah. So it's I think there's a lot of happening there, and we just started. It's very early days, but some early signs that it's a very interesting market for us.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Look forward to seeing how the business progresses, Lars. Lars Veul is co-founder and CEO of Pargo. Thanks so much for visiting TechCentral today.
Thank you. Yeah.
Great to be
with you. Thanks.
Thank you.